Hi, my name is Carey Holzman, and this is now part 3 of my latest series where we're looking at different computers at different price points and what you get for your money. Now, so far we've reviewed a HP $350 computer. We've built our own computer for $350, and I don't recommend either one of those for any of my clients, and if they're not good enough for my clients, they're not good enough for you. So people say, well, what do you recommend? Bottom line, I don't have a lot of money. What is the least I could spend to get something that you would recommend? Well, I am so glad you asked me that, because this is what I'm going to do right now, is build the least I can build that I would put my name on. You have to understand that I don't build cheap computers. I build inexpensive computers for what you get for your money. But now you can see from part 1 in the series and part 2 in the series that you do get what you pay for. Now, I do understand, as I previously mentioned in the other videos, I feel it's important to reiterate because of the comments that didn't hear it the first 2 times. If that's all you have is $350 and that's all you have to spend, that's fine. You just need to know what to expect to get for your money. That's all my goal is in this series, is to express to you that you aren't getting what I'm going to build here for $350. What you're going to get for $350 is worth $350 or less, depending on who you're buying it from and what you're buying. There are exceptions to every rule. It's always possible. You might go to a store and they have some closeout floor model that they've reduced the price on. That may be cheaper that way, but in general, all computers are sold at a profit. They're typically not loss leaders, and you don't have to spend a lot of money to get a good computer. And this is a great example right here. I'd have to get the price list out here, but I want to say this was between $700 and $800. So it's twice the price of the previous 2 machines that we just looked at, but it's also 3 to 4 times the computer. And what I mean by that is I haven't yet run the performance benchmarks on these computers, because I don't want to run them on one video for one computer and another video for another computer and another video for another computer. So instead, I'm going to show you each computer, and I'll do a video just on the benchmarks, and we can look at them side by side by side. And if you look at how much gigahertz you're getting for the dollar, if you look at how much RAM you're getting for the dollar, you'll see that this is the best deal. It's the best bang for the buck. It means for what you are getting for the dollar. In other words, sometimes you hear of a bulk discount. So if you go to buy 1 of something, it costs this much money, but if you buy 10, they lower the price. And so the price of each item now has been reduced. That's a better value for your money. Now, one might argue, what if you don't need 10 of them? Well, that's not my problem. I'm just stating that if we're talking about computers, ideally you want a computer that you're not going to have to replace anytime soon. And ideally you want a computer that's not going to be worth half of what you paid for it next year. And that line of how you get there is always moving. It fluctuates. The prices are always moving up and down. New products are always coming out. The fastest product today won't be the fastest product next year. But the fastest product today will be the most expensive one, guaranteed, every single time. So when people say, I'm thinking of building a system, and should I wait until this next whatever video card or CPU or chipset comes out? Well, there's always another video card. There's always another chipset. There's always another video CPU coming out. It's always happening. So if you want to wait to buy, you'll never buy. You will just always wait. So it's some people say, well, can I buy some of the parts now? Because I don't. You've convinced me not to buy a $350 computer, but can I buy some of the parts now and then buy some of the parts later? Well, the problem with that logic is the parts depreciate and become obsolete rather quickly compared to other things that we buy. That said, I wouldn't buy any RAM or CPU. However, cases really haven't changed much over the years. Power supplies haven't changed much over the years if you can anticipate how much power you're going to need. If you don't know what video card you're going to buy yet, you might want to hold off on buying that power supply. CPUs, motherboards, video cards, chipsets, even hard drives. They just keep getting faster. On the case of hard drives, the solid state drives are getting not only faster but even more capacious. You know, they're being able to hold more data. They cost less money. So to buy parts today that you're not going to build 3 or 6 months from now, it's going to cost you more money. You'd be better off buying all the parts at once. There's another reason for that. Let's just say if the motherboard technology never changed. So you went ahead and you bought your motherboard, and you waited 4 months, and then you bought your CPU. And you found out your motherboard that you ordered is bad. You cannot ship that back to where you bought it for another one. Now you've got to contact the manufacturer, arrange for an RMA. Maybe you didn't get around to it for a year. Now your warranty is completely shot. And they don't care. It's irrelevant whether or not you use the product. The warranty starts the day you buy the product, whether you take it out of the box or you stick it in a closet. That's the day the warranty starts. No exceptions. So you're ticking away on your warranty. On a case, pretty much case is a case. When you get it, open the box, check to make sure there's no damage from shipping, there's no dents, it appears to be fine, and you're probably going to be okay. Although I did have a case where a power button didn't work, and it was under warranty, and Corsair sent me a new switch. I didn't have to send the whole case back because that would have cost more than just buying another case for what this would cost to ship. Well, not this one, but a higher-end Corsair case on the digital audio workstation. And thankfully, they were able to just send me a new switch. I've never seen that happen before. Most of the time, the parts I get are all fine. But again, I have very good delivery people here. If the delivery person in your area is drop kicking the boxes to your front door, you may have really bad luck with ordering parts through the mail. But it's not the manufacturer's fault, and it's not the reseller's fault. It's happening on the last leg of its journey to your location, if it's happening a lot. I very rarely receive any dead on arrival parts, or what we call DOA parts. I can't remember the last time I got a bad stick of RAM, or I've never even seen a bad solid state drive. I couldn't tell you the last time I had a bad motherboard. I don't know, it's been years. The closest thing is that power switch on the case, which was just really bizarre. Some people are asking about those videos, the digital audio workstation videos. All the videos been shot. The computer was delivered way back in Thanksgiving of 2013. I just have to find the time to edit them. And right now I'm just trying to get this project done, and I've got several projects behind it. So the video's done. I just need a video editor. That's what I need. Also, I'd like to do a video shooting point of view, which would be like Google Glass or a GoPro that I can put on my head, and then you'll see what I'm seeing, and that'll be a future video. But I'm not going to go buy a GoPro Hero camera to shoot one video, and I'm not going to buy Google Glass for $1,500 so I can shoot one video. But if anybody has one that they would loan to me, I would appreciate it. Please reach out to me. You've got to be in the USA, otherwise there's custom taxes and stuff. So if you're in the USA and you'd like to contribute to the video, of course I'm going to send it back. I don't need it. Once I film the video, I'm done with it, so I don't want to buy one. So that's an idea for what's coming up in a future video. And also would like to encourage you guys to send pictures of your builds or film yourself building. I live by a motto: inspire others. I would love for you guys to share your pictures with me of your build process. If you had difficulties, let me know what they were. If things were easier than you expected, let me know. And I will do a future video where I'm going to showcase all of these pictures and these videos to help inspire others just like yourselves. So even you can inspire others. We can all, that sounded bad, even you. Of course you can inspire others. We all can. So, all right, So let's get back to what do we got here. This is going to be a workstation for a business. That said, we're not gaming with it. So I'm trying to keep the price as low as possible for this customer without reducing the quality, without tarnishing my brand name, and without costing me money with support calls. So what we've got here is one of my old favorites. It's the Antec EarthWatts 380 watt power supply. These are pretty inexpensive considering the quality of what you get. I can't tell you the last time I've seen one of these go bad. Every one I've installed in the last 3 or 4 years, at least within the last 3 or 4 years, I haven't had a bad one. So if I've had any before that, I just don't remember. So that's the power supply we're going to use. You should know that this power supply does not come with a power cable. It's part of their being Antec's idea of being ecologically friendly, because they figure you've already got a standard PC power cable. I don't know why they do that, but PC power cables are very, very inexpensive. If you need a power cable, if you buy a Corsair power supply, they fit really well in the Corsair cases. They cost a bit more. And most power supplies other than this one do come with power cables. This one doesn't. I'm swimming in standard PC power cables, so it's no big deal to me. In fact, it's kind of a relief so I can get rid of some of them. Again, which goes back to why they're not including it in the box. The motherboard is, let me move some stuff out of the way here, is a B85M D2V Gigabye board. I only use Gigabye or ASUS motherboards. That's it. If I'm putting my name on it, I need to know that what I'm using is quality. I need to know what I'm using will have support. In the rare instance that I will need it, I will be able to reach out to somebody and actually get some help. So that's why I use only Gigabye and only ASUS motherboards. And you should also know, especially when you're building an Intel-based system, that Gigabye actually works with Intel directly to develop the chipsets that all the other motherboard manufacturers, including Intel, use on their CPUs, on their boards. The chipsets on the boards. That's how big Gigabye is. In fact, they are the #1 or #2 manufacturer, depending on when you check. One month it's ASUS and 1 month it's Gigabye. That's how many boards they sell. You can buy cheaper boards, but statistically speaking, putting a computer together is going to be easier when you use quality parts. It's going to last longer. It's going to be a more pleasurable experience. It won't be as frustrating. And especially if you need support, even things like the owner's manuals, which can be often written in really poor English, are done really well on Gigabye and ASUS boards. BIOS updates and driver updates are typically updated regularly. With other lesser name brands, support can often be quite lacking. Also, very good warranty on everything here. The CPU we're using is the Core i5. This is the 4460. This was, at the time, I felt the best bang for the buck. And although this looks like Windows 8, this is how they sell Windows 7 now. And they've made the product keys so small that even with my glasses, the product key is difficult to read on this. I don't know what Microsoft is thinking, but who's ever responsible for choosing this font size should be forced to enter these product keys into, I don't know, about 400 computers. And then I would like the statistics back on how many keys they had to re-enter because a B looked like an 8, or a 6 looked like a G, or an M looked like an H. This happens all the time. So to make these product keys so tiny adds to the discouragement that you have to enter the product key to begin with. But that's just me complaining, and that's what I do best. For RAM, there's a company called Team, and they have some really good value RAM. This RAM is actually designed for overclocking. The reason I selected it is it was a good price. And anytime we're going with 8 gigs here, 2 4 gig modules, I never go with just one 8 gig module, because 2 4 gig modules are going to be faster because it puts it into dual channel mode. The only time I'd ever go with one 8 gig module would be if somebody said they wanted to go to 16 gigs fairly soon. So I would leave the other memory socket empty. The problem with that philosophy, though, is if they don't get the exact brand, speed, and everything in memory, the faster the computer is, the more finicky it's going to be about the memory. So you're better off getting what you need when you need it. And my suggestion would be, if this memory, I can't remember how many memory sockets this has. We'll get to that in a minute. But let's say we only have 2 memory sockets. We want to make sure that both of them are the same brand, same speed, same everything. They've got to be an identical pair if we want to statistically improve the reliability and the compatibility of the system, of the hardware. So that's the logic behind it. And if you wanted to upgrade later, then I'd say pull these 2 out and go buy 2 8s, and that's how you get your 16. You could buy another pair that's matched if there were 4 memory slots. And as long as the pairs are matched up and the speeds are matched up, the brand shouldn't matter. Sometimes the brands don't matter, sometimes they do. So I just, it's time or money. I know if I get 2 matching sticks, they're going to work. They're going to be compatible. And I can get on with life. I don't have to sit there and trace why I'm getting random blue screens and spend hours on end trying to diagnose an intermittent problem, which is very, very frustrating and ends up costing me money, because that's time I could be spending fixing a computer that I didn't build. In fact, that's the way I like to spend all my time, is fixing computers I don't build. I very rarely ever have to fix a computer I do build. But I go through a lot of checks. There's a lot of cross checks and things. Because the parts that I receive have always been fine, there's no reason for me to take the parts out and hook them up on a test bench and make sure they work, only to disassemble them, but just making more work for myself. So some people have asked that question. I think you're overhandling the parts, and you're increasing the likelihood of damage by hooking everything up outside of the case to see if everything works before you put it in the case. Life is, in my opinion, not about avoiding problems. It's not about what can I do to take shortcuts to make sure that I have no bad experiences. You would have a very boring life, and you would have no stories to tell anybody that would be interesting. If you think about the stories you tell people, they're usually about events in your life that were unexpected. They may have been obstacles that you overcame. If you're watching this video, I guarantee you've overcome every obstacle that's come your way so far. And if you were going to tell me a story, share a story with me that you thought I might be interested in, chances are it's not something where you said, well, I went outside and I walked for 4 miles and then I came home and nothing happened. Wow, what an interesting story. So don't try to, too many people out there are trying to avoid life, trying to avoid having problems. Can you tell me how I can build this computer without there ever being a problem along the way? Can you tell me if I need to do something to this part that I haven't yet installed? When I grabbed my motherboard, I felt a static shock. Did I just fry my motherboard? I don't know. Do you know how you know? You finish your build and you see if it turns on and if it works. That's how you know. Okay? There's no guarantees in life. And so whether it works or it doesn't, you're going to have an interesting story to tell. But to try and guess, and I find this kind of amusing, because when I worked at Intel, I worked with some real stereotypical nerds. And they would, I swear to you, they would argue for 30 minutes about the results of a test that they hadn't run yet. And the test took 30 seconds to run. And they would argue about speculation. And it's like, enough speculation, just do it and deal with it. That's it. It's no big deal. I promise you, the thing isn't going to blow up, okay? It's not going to catch fire. I mean, unless you did something really, really wrong. In which case, I would love to know how you did that. You should make a video that doesn't involve, actually matches or lighter fluid. It's just not, nothing that terrible is going to happen. So let's get rid of that fear. Let's get rid of that attitude, and let's go at it and say, you know what, this is going to be fun. And if I run into any problems, I'll figure them out. All right. For the optical drive, we've got just the standard drive you see me use all the time. It's a Liteon. I like the Liteon drives, but to be honest, I think any DVD burner, whether it's from Samsung or Asus or LG or Liteon, are all pretty much the same now. They're all about $20. I think I picked this one up because it was $5 off. So I was trying to keep the price down. So I think it was 15 bucks at that time. For the hard drive, again, this is a business environment. So we're going to use a single Samsung EVO solid state drive. This is a 250 gig drive, which is actually more than the customer needs. Some people are concerned that the drives don't have much capacity, but you have to understand, in a business environment, you don't want the drive to have much capacity. We don't want the employees saving stuff on their hard drives. We want them saving stuff on the server. And this has saved my bacon a couple times where employees have called me and said their computer was telling them they were running out of space. What do? And I've learned that they were offloading a bunch of their personal pictures off of their phone onto their computer, which is not allowed. The owner of the company never gave them permission to do that. Now, there is plenty of room on the server, and if they wanted to make a private folder for their pictures on the server with the owner's permission, they could do that. But then that makes the backups take longer, and that ends up costing the owner of the company more money. So it does cost money to have more data because you've got to back that data up and protect it. And we don't back up every single workstation every day. The server gets backed up every day, and we want the employees to save everything on the server. So by having a smallish, by the way, 250 gig, calling that small, I don't know, seems a little preposterous. But 250 gig is a lot of space, and especially in the environment that it's going to be used in. And it gives them room to grow in the future because we don't have a crystal ball. We can't see into the future. We don't know how the business needs might change. And we want to make sure this computer is upgradable as possible. Now, some people have asked me why I use a mid-tower case with a micro ATX board. Clearly, I could have bought a case that was much smaller than this because this board's going to be dwarfed inside of this case. And the reason I do that, there's two reasons. Well, there's three. The first reason is cost. This case is not the best case you can buy. Let me rephrase this. The Corsair 200R case is not the best case money can buy, but in my opinion, it's the best case you can buy for the money. It's going to have a lot of free room in here, which is going to make the cable management look clean, which is going to give us a lot of good airflow. This thing is never going to overheat. I mean, unless something really drastically goes wrong, like the CPU fan fails. I've never seen an Intel stock CPU fan fail on any of the core processors. Maybe back in the 486 days, I might have run into a couple, but not today. Very, very reliable CPU fans. So that would really be, and the CPUs throttle themselves down now to prevent overheating. So I don't think this would ever overheat. The other reason that I named, two reasons: price for the quality, for what you're getting, airflow because there's so much room in the case, and finally, we don't know what the future requirements of this company are going to be. Are they going to start doing videos and now they need more hard drives? Are they going to need a full-size motherboard to handle video processing? Or are they going to start doing architectural drawings and they need more power? Well, I can save them some money by keeping the case and the optical drive and just changing out the motherboard, the RAM, and the CPU. In fact, we might not even need to change the RAM. Depends on how many months or years goes by before they have to, before they have to upgrade or their needs have changed. If their needs stay the same for the next 10 years, this computer's, they're never going to be happier. This computer's going to run great. Guarantee it for the lifespan of Windows 7. Windows 7 isn't set to expire until 2020. This is June of 2014, so Windows 7 is good till 6 more years. So with that said, one of the other things that I run into is someone will inevitably leave a comment that says the video starts at 14 minutes and however many seconds, skipping past everything I just told you guys. And I have to tell you, that's very disrespectful, and I will remove your comment if you do that. Although this information may not be useful or you may not be interested in it, doesn't mean somebody else isn't. So please be considerate of others. They know how to drag the fast forward button, okay? They don't, and I don't need you to tell people to skip through my stuff if I didn't think it was important enough of information. If I didn't think that information was going to be helpful to someone, I wouldn't have said it. So again, I appreciate your consideration with that. Now, the video starts. That's not true. The video's been started, but now we can start building. All right. So where I always begin is just with the easy stuff. With the Corsair case, we're going to start by simply removing these side panels. There's just 2 screws on the side. You've seen me use this case numerous times before. I'm very happy to see that Corsair has continued to make it. And I've got to tell you something. In the world of technology, where things are always evolving very, very quickly, it tickles me and it makes me feel vindicated when parts I used years ago haven't changed in design and are still exactly the same parts today. Like this power supply. I've been buying these power supplies for 4 or 5 years at least, maybe longer. And it's even like in the same box. Nothing's changed. What does that tell me? It tells me they didn't have to fix anything. It's designed well right from the get-go, and it didn't need to be improved. And the motherboard technology hasn't required anything different than that, so it's great. It's 80 plus energy efficient. And it's the same, pretty much as far as I can tell, it's the same power supply today as it's been. This Corsair 200R case, with a lot of case manufacturers, they're pretty quick to change their designs to try and keep everything fresh. But sometimes when you have a good design, just stick with it. And I believe that's what Corsair has done here. And I got to tell you, it's kind of funny. Let me take these panels off as I tell you a little story. The very first time I used the Corsair 200R case, there are a couple things I nitpicked about. But it's in my personality, okay? It's my job. It's what I do. It's my job to complain. There's a joke that may offend some people. I hope it doesn't. But I was raised Jewish, and there's a joke that the Jewish people they're never happy. They're just always, everything's just awful. There's an old joke about the old man on a train, the old Jewish man on a train, and he's sitting there all by himself, and he says, "Boy, am I thirsty. Oy, am I thirsty." And this guy sitting across from the train just can't. He's like, this guy, I got to listen to this guy for the whole train ride? He has enough. He gets up, he walks all the way down to the other end of the train, gets one of those little pointy cups and then fills it with water, and walks back. As he's walking back, he can see the old man is still talking to himself. "Oy, am I thirsty." So he says, "Here, drink this." And the old man takes it, drinks it. The guy sits back down across from him thinking, finally, I'm going to have some peace and quiet. And within 10 seconds, the old man says, "Oi, was I thirsty?" Okay, so I can't help it. This is how I was raised. Just for one more example, a joke of a bunch of Jewish ladies sitting around a table at a restaurant, and the waiter comes by and says, "Excuse me, ladies, is anything okay?" I love these jokes. There is a sense of entitlement that because I was raised Jewish, I can tell these jokes without offending other Jewish people. But be that as it may, and regardless of what your beliefs are, I tend to find a lot of things that are wrong with just about anything, all right? And the idea is to improve that product. And one of the reasons that I buy all the product that you see me review, in most cases I buy all the product. I'll tell you a little secret that you may not be aware of. But when companies like, let's say Newegg, for example, which is a great company, love Newegg, I buy a lot of parts from Newegg. Paul Lilly, who does the videos, Paul's a great guy, had him on my radio program years ago, got along great with him. But you have to understand that Paul cannot be objective. He can't say this case is a piece of junk because they sell that case. You know, he might be some moderately critical about a couple of things, maybe. But you got to remember that they're selling this. So how are they going to sell it if they tell you it's junk? So it's in their own best nature to simply introduce the product to you and keep their opinions to themselves, or to just point out the nice things and don't mention anything about the bad things. When companies email me and they ask me for a review, and this has happened time and time again, and I have a critical review where I basically do not like the product, the company, more often than not, will never offer to send me anything to review ever again. They often don't want an honest review. They want you to say good things about their product. They don't want to hear about the flaws. And now, this has just been my personal experience, and it doesn't cover every company, okay? There are rare companies that do see the value of somebody pointing out the flaws, because companies pay people, they pay experts to tell them how to fix their products. And so when you send it to a reviewer and a reviewer tells you how to fix your product for free, they're helping you for a fraction of the cost of what a professional expert would do in a consultant advisement situation. So a lot of companies, it's more complicated than that, though, because the companies don't necessarily send you the parts directly. It goes through a PR company. So PR company is about public relations, and it's all about, we're going to make your product look good if you pay us money, right? So then the PR company says, hey, will you review this product? And if the review is bad, the PR company says, you just made us look bad because we told the client we'd make the product look good. Well, there's an old expression, you can't polish a turd. So if the product is junk, I'm going to be honest with you and I'm going to tell you it's junk. And when I buy my products, I'm buying the product off the shelf or online just like you would. I'm getting no special treatment. I'm getting no special discounts. And the people I'm buying them from don't know I'm using them for reviews. If you're familiar with Consumer Reports magazine, it's the same thing. When they go to review a car, they visit different dealerships around the United States. They don't visit the same dealership and see the same salesman because they don't want them to know that they're not an ordinary consumer just buying a car. And they don't want to give the PR company an opportunity to modify that product in some way, shape, or form that is different from what the consumer is going to end up getting, or to give you special treatment, like if you have a problem to call a special number for support. No, I want to call the same number everybody else has to call. So my review can be 100% accurate to real life. So that's why it's so important to me to buy all my own stuff. And that way I can be objective. And the companies, they can either see the benefit of that or not. Now, the reason I said all of that is I initially was critical of a couple of things with the Corsair case. I think initially there was not a front fan, if I'm not mistaken, and now it seems like they've added a fan. I could be wrong, I'd have to go back and look at the videos, but I don't remember there being a fan up front, which there is now and there has been for quite some time. But I think that was one of my issues, and there was another issue, actually I think there were 2 or 3 issues that I had. Oh, I know, one was the power button. I'm not a fan of this design because it's not a physical switch, and I've already had one of these Corsair cases. After I predicted that this was a potential point of failure, a brand new case out of the box was broken, and because it's not a physical switch like we're accustomed to in most cases, it's a surface-mounted switch on a circuit board, so the whole circuit board has to be replaced instead of just replacing one switch. But my main concern is the plastic piece here, right up here on the top. Because if you've got a car that has the key fob, the ones that have the plastic key fobs, not the rubberized ones, but the plastic ones. If you ever look at somebody who's got like a 10-year-old car, those things are all cracked. The plastic is all cracked around the buttons. Where the button moves is where the crack is, all around the button. It's just what happens through wear and tear. I haven't had any of these Corsair cases long enough to see that happen yet, but I predict that that's going to crack over time, that plastic will, as the computer's turned on over and over and over again, that plastic will dry out here in the desert where there's no humidity. Obviously, if somebody just leaves their computer on 24/7, they'll be less likely to experience that. But again, talking an average consumer, that was one of the concerns I've had. That said, that design hasn't changed. It's still an issue for me. I think Corsair needs to just get rid of this whole circuit board design and give us regular switches. I think it just would be better. That's my opinion. Let's go ahead and put the optical drive in. We're going to just push the plastic panel out. We're going to slide the drive in. Anything that goes into the front or is exposed from the front gets fed in from the front. And on this Corsair case, again, you've seen this on numerous videos before. We just slide this there's a piece here, and you pull the tab out and then back, and then go ahead and slide the drive in until it's flush, and then slide this piece forward. Now, that drive is locked into position, and no screws are necessarily necessary. However, there is a place to put a screw on each side, one here and one here, one on each side. And because these computers are going to be moved around, I don't want the chance for this optical drive to break free. And in the box that came with the case, they give us plenty of screws. We might as well use them. And even if you don't plan on moving the computer, even if you're watching this video and you're building along with me and you go, you know, I'm just going to take it from here and move it over there and it's going to sit there forever, it may not sit there forever. You may move one day and you may have to load that into a truck, or you may want to take it to a friend's house one day. And because you were in a hurry and you couldn't be bothered to turn 2 screws, your optical drive broke free and then damaged something in the computer. So that's the logic and the reasoning behind why I will put screws in there. I'm not going to do it right this second, however. We're going to move on to the next thing, which is going to be the optical drive, which we have in the box here. Again, you couldn't ask for an easier installation. First of all, take the optical drive out of the box, okay? You don't need the box. I love, and I've said this before, that Samsung does not wrap this drive in an anti-static bag. Why do you suppose that is? Because it doesn't need one. In fact, most stuff wrapped in anti-static bags doesn't need to be wrapped in an anti-static bag. I won't be surprised if in the near future, when we start getting motherboards, that they no longer put them in anti-static bags, because the risk of static shock has been so reduced with modern components. It's a waste of resources. It's mostly being done now, in my opinion, because that's the way they've always done it, which reminds me of another story. It's just a sign of getting old, like sitting with your grandpa. Let me tell you a story that's completely off topic of what we're talking about. There's a story of a little girl who asks her mother why during Christmas time does her mother, she always cuts the end off of the ham before she cooks it. And the mother says, I cut the end off of the ham because that's the way my mother always did it. So the little girl asks her grandmother, Grandma, how come you always cut the end of the ham off before you cook it? And the grandmother says, oh, I do that because that's the way my mother always did it. Well, it just so happens her great-grandmother is still alive. And the little girl goes to her great-grandmother and she says, I asked Mommy and I asked Grandma why they cut the end off of the ham before they cook it, and they said it's because that's the way you did it. So why did you do that? Or why do Mommy and Grandma cut the end off of the ham? And her great-grandmother said, Dear, I have no idea why your mother and your grandmother cut the end off of their ham. I cut the end off of my ham because the pan wasn't big enough. You see, the tale of the story is sometimes people do things because that's the way they've always done them, and they forget why. And it's a matter of just breaking these habits or these traditions to accommodate modern times. For example, a lot of people think defragmenting a hard drive is a good idea. But with a solid state drive, you never ever want to defragment these. The technology has changed, and that is a tradition that needs to go. And it's one of the checks that you do when you install a solid state drive, when you get your operating system installed, is to make sure on Windows 7 and Windows 8 and Windows Vista that auto defrag is disabled. The operating system will, if everything's done correctly, will do this automatically during installation. However, you should be aware that if you're upgrading your current mechanical drive to a solid state drive and you just clone your operating system over, it may not recognize that as a solid state drive. It may not realize that you've changed drives because you didn't do a clean install. And it'll just kill this drive. This drive has memory cells that can be written to a certain number of times before they die. And by defragmenting it, all you're doing is adding additional wear and tear that's going to ultimately kill this drive that much sooner. So let's not do things because that's the way they've always been done. Let's know why we're doing it. And I think that's important to know why. And that's why my videos get a little lengthy, because I think it's important to explain the reasoning and the logic so that you're not just following along with me, but when you encounter something that is different from the way I'm showing it, you can think on your own and say, well, why is mine different? How does that make sense? And be able to be self-sustaining, to be able to help yourself, to be able to not just follow along with a set of rules, but to use your own judgment to understand why those rules are there and how to modify them if need be to get you past an obstacle. So anyway, this drive, look how difficult this is to put in. We've taken it out of the box and we're going to put it right down here. There's a place for 4 drives to go in. So the fan header's in the way, our fan cable's in the way. Let's move that out of the way. And this just slides in like this. That drives in. Now once again, you don't have to put screws in it. I'm still going to. I want that drive secure. Even though there's no moving parts and it can bounce around in there all it wants to, we've got the screws. Why not use them? All right, we're not going to do that yet because the next thing I'm going to put in is the power supply. I'm going to come around so you can see that. First of all, let's get this power supply out of the box. One of the things that I find slightly humorous and a bit hypocritical is, as I mentioned, they don't give you a power cord with this because they don't think it's very ecological, but that doesn't stop them from using unnecessary packaging. I mean, the box isn't really bigger than it needs to be. I don't so much have a problem with the box or this egg crate additional protection packing material. But then they wrap a piece of paper around it, I guess to keep it from getting loose in the box, which they could solve by using a smaller box. So that's going to end up in the landfill. That's going to end up in a landfill. This is going to end up in a landfill. And there's no reason for it to be wrapped in plastic. It's already, how is it going to get scratched if it's wrapped in, you know, just if it had this, with this egg carton cardboard in this box, if anything goes through this box, it's probably going to go through this plastic. So this is just, to me, not very ecological. So I wish that Antec was a little more serious about their ecological concerns. Even this paperwork, this is a 3-year warranty on this power supply, by the way, which is an excellent warranty for a $50 power supply. But is this paperwork all entirely necessary? This, again, if you want to, I'm not an ecologist, but if we're going to talk about ecology and we're going to say we're doing things for the ecology, and they do some things but not other things, it seems like they don't really mean it. It seems like they're only half in it. So, see, that's there's me being Jewish again. How many people are Jewish are going to be really mad at me right now? And you realize if they are, then they're complaining. Sorry, it just occurred to me. All right, so once again, this is going to wind up in a landfill. Now, let's get some of this stuff out of the way. Well, what else we got in here? Something else. We've got screws for the power supply, and we've got the silica gel that says "Do not eat." I've talked about this before. I don't know why nothing else says "Do not eat." This box right here says nothing about not eating it, so apparently you can eat everything else. But for God's sake, don't eat this. You know what? It needs a little salt. All right, let's get rid of that. The solid state drive instructions, software, that's all here. I'm just going to set that aside. I'm just trying to clean my work area, make things a little less cluttered. I'll just set that over there. These instructions can go over there. All right. Power supply. Let's get the screws out. I'm going to use the screws that came with the power supply. We could use the screws that came with the case. They're pretty much the same screws. It's a little unwise for me to open this with a knife because I would make my life a lot easier and a lot safer if I just grabbed a pair of scissors. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Okay. Having the right tool for the job can make a big difference too. I talk a lot about that. One of the examples I give is that you could be a great mechanic, but if all you have is a pair of pliers and a screwdriver, and they ask you to rebuild a transmission, you might find that to be a challenging job, and when you're done, it may not be the best work that you've ever done, and people might think you're not as good as you say you are. If you're a surgeon, and all you've got is an X-Acto knife and some wire clamps, you may not appear to be as good of a surgeon as you really are because you don't have the right tools. Well, that doesn't mean you have to go out and buy $1 million tools either. So it's just a matter of having the right tools. So it makes your job easier. And well, I'll give you an example. My nephew built a computer. He saw my videos, and his parents bought the parts for him. And he was having a little difficulty putting it together because he went with a shuttle. Was it a shuttle case? I think it was a Prodigy. I can't remember the case, but it was a smaller case. And if you've never built a computer before, that's not the easiest case to work on. So I took a look at it and I said, well, I'm not going to touch it. I want you to do the work. But you need to change, you're missing a screw here. And he pulls out this little jeweler's screwdriver. And I said, what are you using that jeweler's screwdriver for? And he goes, well, that's the only screwdriver I have. I go, you just spent $1,000, or your parents spent $1,000, $1,200 on computer parts. Do you tell them you need a $5 screwdriver? Just a basic number 2 Phillips screwdriver. And I'm sure it would have other uses around the house after the computer's built. There's no reason for you to be struggling when you've never built a computer before in a case that's hard to work on, using a jeweler's screwdriver that doesn't quite fit in the screw right, which is very easy to strip the screws out and very difficult to keep the screw straight when you're getting it started on the thread because it's rolling around on the end of the screwdriver. So having the right tools can make a big difference, but I just want to emphasize that having the right tools doesn't mean you have to spend a lot of money. In fact, the yellow screwdriver you see me use, which I think I have in here, without any bits, this is $7, I think, $7 or $8. And in fact, I'll put a link to it. I've had links to this in my other videos. And then you can buy the bits, just buy the bits you want. Buy number 2 Phillips, buy a T15 Torx, buy a flat edge, stick them in the handle. You're good to go. And it costs you, maybe with the bits, the whole total will be $15, maybe. This particular screwdriver I've had, I think since the 1990s, this one. So it's something's going to last you a really long time. You will more likely lose this screwdriver than break it or have it no longer be able to build a computer, no matter how computers change in the future. It's highly unlikely they're going to step away from the standard Phillips number 2 screw to hold the pieces together. They haven't in all the years I've been doing it. Okay, let's get to the power supply. Now this power supply is the older design, so that's okay. This case, these are the instructions for the case, by the way. We'll just set those over there. So this case has a filter on the bottom, which I've talked about before. Because a modern power supply has an intake fan on the bottom of the power supply, and then the fan on the back blows air out. So it's bringing air up through the bottom and out through the back. The older style power supplies, which is what this is, actually bring air in from the back of the power supply and straight through out the back. With the system that we're building, this makes no difference at all. If anything, the danger that people may not realize when they install a power supply that this case, I would say this case is designed for, but the case is really designed for either style. If you set this on carpeting, what you've got is an expensive vacuum cleaner. Your power supply is not going to be able to breathe. It's going to overheat, and you're going to have a power supply failure. So with this design, this computer can go on carpeting without suffocating it. So I still kind of like the old design better for that reason. Now, a couple of steps can be made to help clear this. One is don't put it on carpet. But another is for Corsair or all the other case manufacturers to make the feet larger on the computer, to just lift it up so it's an inch or so off of the ground. With the feet, you could get some wooden blocks and stick some wooden blocks under there, or I don't know, even a couple of books, just so you don't block that bottom. But in either case, it's irrelevant with this power supply. This computer can go on the thickest shag carpet. It's not going to affect the cooling of the computer whatsoever. So that is one of the advantages of going with this power supply. One of the disadvantages of going with this power supply is it is only 380 watts. So if you're building a gaming system, chances are your video card is going to need that all by itself. So it's not a very powerful power supply. On the other hand, your system's only going to use what it needs. So if this was a 1200 watt power supply and our system needs 250 watts, the 1200 watt power supply is going to cost the same to power that computer. It's going to generate the same amount of, it's only going to deliver the amount of power that is required up to its limit. That's how power supplies work. So you always want more power than you need, because if you've got a 380 watt power supply and you're pushing 380 watts through it, it's going to get really, really hot. And heat is the enemy. Heat causes wear, and that excessive heat will cause excessive wear, which will cause failure sooner rather than later. So again, going right back to the reasoning behind why I select the parts I select. You know, it's another one of those questions that people go, well, how do you know what motherboard to use, and how do you know what processor to use? We'll get into that in a future video. But for right now, it's important that I explain why I select the brands I select and why I select the designs I select from the brands. Okay, it's all about the best bang for the buck and how that's defined. So we're just going to set this in, set power supply in here. There's a little catch that's going to slide under right there. And when I put the power supply in, I want to make sure, because the power supply could go in either way. It's pretty easy on this one because you want to be able to read the label, and you want your cables up against the edge. If the cables are out here, your cabling is going to look terrible. So you want your cabling up against the edge, because that's going to, you know, we can run the cables directly out through these holes without running them. You may have a hard time visualizing this. Let me just show you. If I flip this over this way, okay, the next guy who works on this computer has no information on the power supply because the label's hidden, number one. Number two, I now have to run the cables across this big empty area, which the cables may not reach in some cases where I need them to go. It's going to look awful. Will it work? Absolutely. The holes will line up to mount, no problem. You can mount it either way. It will power the computer the same. The difference is how it's going to look and how that's going to affect years from now when you have to diagnose something or someone else has to diagnose something, how much easier it'll be if you just take a few moments to understand the reasoning why it goes in this direction. So with power supply in, we can take the screws now, and you'll see I've got my my Panasonic screwdriver. This is my EY-7410. This is an expensive screwdriver, but I build computers all the time, and it is a tool. And as I said, techs or anybody in a service industry is only as good as their tools. Now, if you're a novice computer builder, I don't recommend you use an electronic screwdriver because it's too easy to strip screws out and not even realize you've stripped them out. They're great if you're taking something apart because there's no concern about stripping the screws. But when you're building, you might be best off to use a mechanical screwdriver unless you're just familiar with your electric screwdriver. You just want to start getting used to it. The screwdriver has 2 speeds, so if you are just getting started, make sure you put it on the slower speed first. And this has a clutch on it to prevent from over tightening the screws. And I set the clutch on this model to 3. Now every screwdriver manufacturer's got different clutch definitions of their settings. 3 might be too much or too little from, say, a Ryobi screwdriver or from a DeWalt screwdriver. It depends on the driver. In fact, I think on my DeWalt I set it to 2. So if you want to use an electric screwdriver, use caution to make sure the screws are lined up correctly before you start tightening them down. So with the torque setting on 3, I'm going to go ahead and put it on high speed because, you know, I know what I'm doing. I've done this a few times before. And we're just going to go ahead and start lining these screws up. We just want to get them started. The reason we get them started is so that if, like in this case, things aren't lining up, we can still wiggle this around. And if I had tightened this screw down, then I wouldn't be able to see how much wiggle I've got in here. Wiggle it a little bit. There we go, right in there. Got that one started. And got that one started. And got that one started. Now that they're all started, you can tighten them down. This screwdriver shuts off when that torque setting is hit, so that's what you're hearing, is the torque settings being set. Now I can lock the screwdriver, there's a switch, and now it will function like a mechanical screwdriver if I just want to snug those up a little bit more, although that's not really necessary. I am nothing if not thorough, all right? Just don't over tighten, we don't want to break any of the heads off of the screws. That would not be good. Now, if you've watched my previous videos on, well, for example, the digital audio workstation, I was using the widely proclaimed Seasonic brand power supplies. And if you go back and you watch that and you watch me struggle putting a Seasonic power supply into the same exact case, and to think I paid top dollar for that Seasonic power supply, you could understand why I don't like Seasonic power supplies. They're good power supplies, but they just don't seem to line up well in Corsair cases. I don't know why. Even the Corsair power supplies that are supposedly made by Seasonic fit perfectly in Corsair cases. But the Seasonic branded power supplies, it is a struggle to get the holes to line up, and I don't know why. Somebody's out of spec, and I don't know if it's Seasonic or it's Corsair. I don't know, and I can't be bothered to look into it any further than that. But look how easy that went in. I didn't struggle with it. If you want to see me struggle with one, go and watch the digital audio workstation build. It's crazy because this is a standard that hasn't changed in many, many years, and from a manufacturer that is known and respected as much as Seasonic, it surprises me that when you spend, believe me, it's top dollar for a Seasonic power supply, you'd expect it to fit the standard holes. So, like I said, I don't know who's out of spec, but somebody is. And since I can put an Antec power supply in and I can put a Corsair power supply in, and the one I can't get in or I struggle with is the Seasonic one, I just don't buy Seasonic power supplies for Corsair cases. Simple as that. If a customer absolutely wants one, I'll do it, but I just know when it comes time to put that power supply in, it will not be that easy. Now, while I've got my screwdriver out, I'm going to go ahead and put some screws into the solid state drive and the optical drive. So we go to the bag of screws that came with the case, and there is a bag of screws here that have some very fine threaded screws. And those are the ones we want to use. These threads, when I say fine threaded, I mean in comparison to the other screws. If you just look at them with your eyes, and if you have bad vision, feel them with your fingers. And if they have a wider distance, a wider spacing between each thread, those we're going to use later for mounting the motherboard. The finer thread is what we use for mounting the optical drive, the solid state drive. So I'm going to go ahead and put one screw in here. And on the solid state drive, we can only get to one side of it. And that one side has a space for two screws. There's one. And there's the other. And then we just put one more screw in on this side. Sure. I'm trying to do that so you can see it. That's it. That optical drive's not going nowhere. That solid state drive locked in position. And also be aware when you put your solid state drive in that the connectors are facing the right way. It's very easy to turn that solid state drive around and stick it in and then screw it down and go, wait a minute, where do I plug stuff into it? You put it in backwards. All right, that's okay. If you put it in backwards, just unscrew it, turn it around. It's no big deal. Don't be embarrassed about it. Don't beat yourself up over it. And, you know, deal with it. Get on. It's no big deal. All right, so in this, so far, it's taken a bit longer than it should because I've had a lot of stories to tell along the way. But we've got our power supply, optical drive, and solid state drive installed and mounted. That's all good. So now we can put this I/O shield in. So right back here on the back of the case, there's a rectangular hole. And if I just set this memory aside and open up the motherboard box, which I've got right here, there is our I/O shield. This is what it looks like. Take my scissors out, and we're going to take this I/O shield out of its packaging. Get rid of the packaging. Now, this I/O shield can go in this way or this way, see? So how do you know which way it goes in? Look at where the keyboard plugs in. Keyboard typically plugs in always at the top. If you're running a motherboard, it only has USB and it doesn't have the traditional PS2 spot ports. Look at where the speaker holes are. Some motherboards will have 3 of these, some will have 6. Those always go towards the bottom. So here's the deal. You reach into the case, you line this thing up, and it's just going to snap into position. You'll hear it. It just goes snap. Just like that. Make sure all 4 corners, you know, are flush. And if you got it backwards, you'll know that when you go to dry fit the motherboard that it's not going to line up with anything. And then you can smack yourself in the head and go, I put that in backwards. Obviously you won't be able to mount the motherboard, so you're just going to remove the motherboard because it wouldn't have been mounted to begin with because it won't line up. Push this out with your hand, turn it around and push it back in. No big deal. All right? There's nothing terrible is going to happen just because you put it in backwards. Again, the reason I'm explaining this is so you understand the reasoning and not just blindly following steps without understanding why those steps exist. Ideally, you have a better comprehension of why you're doing what you're doing and won't make that mistake to begin with. But in the rare occurrence that you do make that mistake, you also need to realize the world's not over, you didn't break anything, don't overreact, accept it as a lesson learned, and move on. It's no big deal, okay? All right, so There's our I/O shield installed. So the last thing, let's step around here. The last thing we have to do, as far as the building process goes, as far as mounting any hardware goes, the last hardware left to mount is the motherboard, the CPU, and the RAM. So we're going to prep those next. So I'm going to get you a better camera angle for that. So, and I'm going to clean up this mess. So we'll do some kind of a transition. Let's have the transition come in from this way. Come on, come this way. Oh, I just want to say, and I should have said this up front, this video, there's a lot of storytelling. And there's going to be some people out there that are going to be like, because I already know the comments that are coming, just get to the build and shut up. This video isn't for you. I do have a 20-minute computer build video if you just want to get to the nitty-gritty. This is for the heart of my listeners, the ones who like to hear the stories. And I'm sorry if you don't like the stories, but just stop watching the video. And I have plenty of other different styles of video. This is the style of this video. And I'm sorry if you don't like it, but you've picked the wrong video. I do have others that will suit you better if that's what you're looking for. So I just wanted to put that out there. And I don't want to deny all the other viewers who do enjoy this dialogue, because I haven't done it in a long time, and I think the majority of the viewers do enjoy it. So I just want to address that before I start seeing all those comments. So one of the other things I see comments about is my dogs. I have Max, the German Shepherd, and I have Lyle, who is a Golden Retriever Chow mix. They are both rescues. Lyle is hilarious. And I've just got to show you something Lyle does. That is the most strange thing I've ever seen a dog do. So I can spend all the money in the world on dog toys for this dog. But you know what he likes better than anything? The box the toys came in. And the city, the sanitation department likes you to break your boxes down before you throw them into the garbage. And if you have a big computer box or something, it can take a while to break that down. But I have a tool called Lyle, and he does it for me. You've got to see this. Lyle. Hey, buddy. You want this box? Oh, did a box once kill your father? What is your deal with boxes? What are you going to do with it? Now what? Where are you going? Where are you going? Max has a cone on his head because he's injured his foot. What are you going to do with that box? He'll actually just start going crazy. He's pretty mellow right now. See, he's ignoring the dog toy. He'd much rather have that box. I think maybe he was kept in a box when he was a puppy, and he has vowed to destroy all boxes. What are you going to do with that thing, Lyle? What are you going to do with it? Carey, can I have it back? Can I have the box back? Give it back. Can I have it? Just give it back. I just need it for a second. Just for a second. Lyle, just give me the... Okay, this is why we can't have Christmas presents under the tree, Lyle. Now, to prep the motherboard for installation into the case, I prefer to do this all before I mount the board into the case. It's possible to go ahead and put the board in bare and then add this stuff after it's been mounted. It's not my preference to do it that way. So it's also easier to show you on camera how things go together with the motherboard being out of the box and not mounted in the case, so it's out in the open. This is everything that comes with the motherboard. This is our box, it's our instruction manual, there's a driver disc in there. And what we'll do is we're going to take the motherboard out of its anti-static bag, right here, and dump that, set that aside. We're going to hold the motherboard by the edges only. You see how I'm holding the board? I'm going to go ahead and set it down on top of the box, and that way I don't scratch up my counter, and the box is a non-conductive surface. Now, nothing we've built up to this point would be jeopardized with electrostatic discharge, but the motherboard can be, and the RAM can be, and the CPU can be. So if you have an anti-static strap, this would be a good time to wear it. If you do not have an anti-static strap, touch something metal that is next to you. So in this case, I'm going to touch the computer case. And what that does is it puts you on the same electrical level. It's different from being grounded. We're not talking about being grounded here. We just want to be on the same electrical level as our environment. There is electricity in the air. Wow, that sounds like a song lyric. Can you feel it? The static stuff, I think people make a bigger deal about than the reality. It's a mystery because you can't really see it, and the effects may not be known right away if any damage occurs, blah, blah, blah. But there are fewer components on a modern motherboard because they've been able to put 180 different computer electronic parts into that one little chip. So now instead of having all these different components, there's just this one that replaces all those other ones. So there's fewer components. The components are more susceptible to static at the factory before they're mounted into the circuit board. Once they're mounted into the circuit board has grounding line, I don't know the right words for it, but it's like this area here where the screws go. These mounting holes are going to ensure that the grounding points aren't going to interfere with the flow of electricity. It's designed that way. I used to say that these little areas around the mounting points that you see, these soldering things, were there to help make that connection to the ground on the case. But I was informed that that's actually there for structural improvement so you don't crush the circuit board if you tighten the screw too much. So see, even I learned stuff from people who watch my videos who I made the video for to teach. And I didn't know that, but it makes perfect sense. Once somebody pointed that out, I went, oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Now this motherboard, you can see we have just 2 sockets for memory, and we're going to open those sockets up. We've got 6 SATA ports. We've got a USB 3 header. We've got a PCI Express slot if a video card wants to be added. 2 PCI Express × 1 slots there for adding whatever hardware. We've got a front port USB 2.0 and actually 2 USB 2.0s here. There's a place for a system fan to go there. It's our front port audio header. All the headers for everything we're going to hook up are all down here on this side of the board. On the back side of the board, turn this around so it's facing you. This board still has the old-fashioned PS2 style keyboard and mouse, which I think is really cool. I don't see any benefit to removing them since they don't really consume any resources anyway. But you can still use a USB keyboard and mouse if you want to, or a combination of the two. We can hook up to 2 monitors. There's a VGA and DVI. There's USB 3.0, that's what the blue ones are. This is a gigabit LAN port right there, and up with 2 more USBs. And then our standard microphone input, audio output, and line input. So red is microphone, green is speakers, and blue is a line input. Okay, now, the first thing I'm going to put on is the CPU. And the way we're going to do that, it's just kind of moving this thing around here, trying to get you a better angle. Let's see. Probably like this, you think? Yeah, sure. That looks good. Right there. Installing the CPU is very, very simple. On an Intel CPU, there's this little lever, and we push it down and away, and it's going to lift up, and it's going to take that little plastic cover, and everything's going to rise right up. See that? And that's as far back as that's going to go right there. I want to make sure it's not going to fall. There's 1,150 of these little tiny pins right down here. They're very delicate. Do not touch them. Don't let anything fall in it. Don't be eating a cookie over that and have crumbs in there. That would be bad. So you want to take some care here, but again, it doesn't require a college degree. It's very simple. Taking the CPU out of the box, and because Intel now owns McAfee, they've got a little thing for McAfee in here, a special offer for resellers. You know where that can go. Put that right in my special offer box. These are your instructions with a little decal you can put on your computer, and those can go right over there by the reseller option. Now the heat sink is on top. We're going to remove that, and we're going to keep the plastic cover on it because this heat sink has this thermal tape on it, or this thermal compound. And you don't have to apply any thermal compound. You use this thermal compound, it's already here. You don't do anything else. But you want to make sure this thermal compound doesn't get contaminated with dust, dirt, fingerprints, oil from your skin. So keep that covered up. So keeps it contamination free, and just set it aside for right now. I'm going to put it right over here. And then in the box, if we lift up right on this ledge right here, this edge, we can pull that up and expose the CPU, and we'll get that out. And then we get rid of that box. Now, one of these corners is cut, so you can get your finger under there and lift up this container so you can take the CPU out. Now you'll see that there's two indentations, and they're there for your fingers to reach in to pull that out. Now there's nothing fragile about the CPU. I can throw this off a 10-story building and it's probably going to work just fine. However, I don't want to contaminate the top with my finger, anything from my fingers like oils from my skin, and I want to keep the surface as clean as possible to help the heat transfer so the thermal compound can do its job. So a lot of people wonder, well, how do you know which direction that goes in? It's very simple. There's a couple ways, but the way I like to follow is if you look closely at the CPU, there, if this thing will focus, there's a notch on each side. And if you look closely at the socket on the board, you'll see a notch on each side. And all you have to do is visualize that. And you see the way I'm handling this? I'm always handling it by the edges. You don't want to touch the bottom, because all these little landings, there's 1,150 of those. If you get your skin, the oils from your skin on there, it could affect the connectivity and the flow of electricity and data that's going back and forth. So keep your hands free of everything but just holding onto the edges, just like you see me do here. One hand or the other, or two hands, right? No big deal. And I'm going to set that down, and I'm just going to kind of gently line up the groove in the CPU with the little notch on the socket. And I'm going to lightly lower it into place. And I should see the other one line up, and I'm going to just grab the top edge and just kind of wiggle that. And it doesn't move. I know it's seated properly. I'm going to lower the lid, and this little fork here is going to go underneath this screw. That's what holds it in place, that screw. And when I push this down, you're going to see that plastic lid pop off. Right? Maybe I can turn this around, you might be able to see a little better. We're going to push that down. It's going to have a lot of resistance. The plastic lid has come off. Just get that out of the way. And just put that right underneath that catch, and that holds that CPU in place. Keeps it nice and flush, tight up against the connectors below it. Now this little plastic cover is there because those connectors are so fragile and so susceptible to damage. So if you ever have to send this motherboard back to the manufacturer for any reason, you must put this back on if you take the CPU out, or they, as far as they're concerned, your warranty is null and void if you do not do that. So this is one of those parts that you want to put away and hope you never need. And if you need it, you better hope you remember where you put it. Otherwise, you're going to be buying a new motherboard. Or you're going to be shipping your motherboard with your CPU, which they'll tell you not to do, because you may not get your CPU back. Now that that's done, we can put the heatsink on. So the heatsink, remember, we've got it here. We've kept it covered in the plastic. It's already got the thermal compound. I love it when people skip through my videos and say, he didn't put any thermal compound. What about the thermal compound? So sometimes I kind of wonder why I go through explaining this just to have to address comments that they wouldn't ask if they'd have watched the video rather than skip through it. So if you have any questions and you are skipping through this video, well, you know what? You wouldn't be seeing this part anyway, would you? So never mind. All right, CPU fan's going to plug on here, and I see that the fan cable's coming out this side. Now, you can put this on any direction. It doesn't matter. It'll fit and work equally well. However, if I put it on this direction, then I have to run the cable around like this to plug it in. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? So it makes most sense to line it up so that the cable is going to line up with the CPU fan header where it plugs in. So I'm going to line it up just like that. And these little towers are going to fit right into these holes. And I'm going to push down on one corner with my thumb. You're going to hear it click. Then I'm going to do the other side, the opposite corner. Again, you hear it click. The opposite corner and the opposite corner. You want to hear that click. If you're a young child doing this, you may not have enough muscle and strength to do that. You may need to get an adult to help you. You can also look on the bottom of the board and verify that those little white clips are coming all the way through. Well, I can show them to you. These little white clips, there's one right there, right there, right there. When my nephew built his, he didn't have it clipped down all the way, and it was one of the things I checked when I looked at it is I simply did this. And 2 or 3 of them went click, click, and I went, well, I'm glad I checked that, because you can't just tell by looking at it. You have to feel it. And if there's not a good solid connection there, your CPU is going to overheat. Then the CPU fan cable goes on very simply. It's got a notch. It's actually 2 notches, because there are 4 pins here, and there's 4 holes. People go, well, how do you know which way it goes on? Well, it goes on so that that little groove that sticks up lines up with the grooves in the connector. Turn that around so you can see it. See if I can give you a better angle. And that's going to go on just like that. Kind of hard to do while I'm filming. But it doesn't click or anything. It just goes on. It seats itself quite snugly. It's not like it's just going to fall off or anything. This is a good opportunity to grab a wire tie right now and to tie this wire up. You don't want this wire getting caught into your fan. That's not good. And it looks terrible as far as cabling your computer and what it's going to look like when it's done. So just take the excess cable like I'm doing here. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And just experiment with it a little bit if you need to. And just do what looks best to your eyes. This is what looks best to my eyes. And I'm going to put 2 wire ties on here. I'm going to put one here. Actually, that's not a wire tie. It's a nylon zip tie. We have all this different terminology, and it's very easy when I'm talking about all this stuff to start mixing some words up. And I apologize if I do that from time to time. So these are nylon zip ties. We're going to use 2 of them, just like so. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and cut the pigtails off. It's a nice clean install, don't you think? I think so. Finally, we can put our RAM on. And the RAM, just tear it out of the box. This is DDR 1600. The reason I use the 1600 is it seems that if you're going to be using built-in video, where the video is, in this case, it's built into the CPU, it's part of the CPU, Intel HD graphics, then you're going to get better video performance with faster RAM. So this is DDR 1600. We've got 2 of these modules. They're 4 gigs apiece. You'll see they've got a notch cut on one side. They've got a heat shield over them, so you can grab it anywhere on the heat shield without any worry of any static discharge. You'll see there's a notch in the socket itself. I always start with the socket well, think about it. If I put this one in first, it's going to be kind of tough to get the other one wedged between the heatsink and the module. So let's put this one in first, right? Because that'll just be easier to put the second one in than if I did it the other way around. I just want to make sure that gets lined up correctly. You put the memory, once again, there's these tabs move back and forth. Make sure they're all in the open position. Make sure that the groove that's cut into the memory matches the notch in the socket. Slide it straight in, and then using your thumbs, push down one corner, then the other corner. Okay, we're going to repeat the same process with the remaining memory module right here. Be sure not to touch any of the exposed gold components, what they call the gold fingers down here, the connector. And we're going to slide that one in exactly the same way. Make sure you find the groove. Got to find your groove, man. And when it's seated properly, then use your thumbs. One side first, then the other side. Doesn't matter which side you start with. Trying to do them both at the same time can get a little frustrating, so I always go one side then the other. That board is now completely assembled and is ready to be mounted into our case. All right, this is always a difficult thing to show on the camera because of the angles that, and gravity that help with installing the board and be able to show you exactly what's going on. So I've got the case laying flat on the counter, and the camera's up on the counter pointing almost straight down. I can't point it completely straight down or the tripod is all you're going to see. So this is the best angle I can get you. So back this way is where all our slots are. There's our power supply right here, right? And that I/O shield that I was talking about is right here. I don't know if I can pick that up and show you on an angle, right? So that's trying to do this without knocking anything off the counter. So one of the first things you want to do is just make sure all the cables are out of your way. Push them out of the way. All of the front port umbilical cables, they're sticking out over here. You can't really see it, but they're sticking out and it's laying on top of them. This exhaust fan, I'm just going to take the power cable and just hang it off the side, get it out of the way. And it's being difficult, so I'm just going to try and, now that ought to keep it in place. Now, on this case, there are standoffs. These are called standoffs. These little metal hexagon-shaped, well, some of them are hexagon, some of them are rounded. The rounded ones don't come out. They're permanent. The hexagon ones, you can use a tool, a 5mm socket like this one. Actually, you just need the socket. You don't, if you've already got a screwdriver with interchangeable sockets, you just need a 5mm socket. And that will fit over those to move them and maneuver them to whatever motherboard standard that you have. Because this case will fit the ATX standard and the mini ATX, I'm sorry, the micro ATX standard, and it may actually fit a couple others, but I'm not going to stop filming right now to go look that up. But regardless, we've got a micro ATX motherboard here, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that every hole in the motherboard lines up with a standoff, and that no standoff exists where there are no holes on the back of the board, because otherwise there's a good chance you will short the board out and ground it out, and it's going to toast the board. So just by looking, I can see we've got, the board's not going to go this far down. So the round standoffs that are down here at the bottom of the case, they can't come out. We're not going to be using those. We also aren't going to be using any of the ones on the far edge because the board's not long enough to reach the bottom or the edge because it's a micro ATX board. So by looking at the board, I can see I've got two close together here, and there are two close together there. I got two close together here, but I only had, I got two close together there. You know what? We may not need to move anything on these standoffs. Let's find out by doing what I call a dry fit. You'll see the way I'm holding the board is by the heat sink. I'm not touching any of the metal components. You could also hold it by the edges, but I think it's just easier to hold it by the heat sink. It's completely safe to do so if you've got the heat sink mounted the way I showed you how to mount it. It's not going anywhere. Put the front ports in first. Line them up with the holes in the I/O shield. And then see where you're at with regards to the holes lining up with the standoffs. Okay, so I should be able to see through this hole and see the standoff behind it, and I do. Same with this one, this one. This one actually, this standoff has a little nub, which is cool because that's holding the board in place for me, so I'll never have to put a screw on that one. And then finally there's two up on top, one there, one there. I see them all. So I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mounting holes. And just to make sure that there's no hidden standoff I cannot see, I want to count how many standoffs I have on the board. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, if I had counted 7, that was in between this area where the board's going to go, right? We saw the board's going to go from here to here We can ignore everything over here on the edges. So if there was a standoff here in the middle, we wouldn't have been able to see it because there's no hole in the board. That would short the board out. So we know we've got 6 standoffs, we've got 6 mounting holes. We don't have to move a thing. The way the case comes out of the box fits the motherboard perfectly. So I'm going to go ahead and mount the board back in once again, putting the ports, lining the ports up with the holes first. Then I kind of push down on the board so that it seats. It doesn't click or anything. It just, this one particular standoff on the, not all cases have this, but on the Corsair 200R, they have this one standoff that's there to hold the board in position for you, which is wonderful. Now before you tighten anything down, let me get this box out of the way. You want to make sure that all your ports on the back line up. You want to be able to see your audio plugs. You want to be able to access your network port. Make sure that with some motherboards they have these grounding straps, and if you bend the grounding strap in as you're putting the board on, it'll cover the port, and then you have to take the whole board back out again just to bend that strap back and put it back. So now's the time to just double check and make sure that everything's coming through clearly, that you'll have direct access to all those ports. Again, when you buy a cheaper case, when you spend less money and you buy lesser materials, this can be more difficult. But because Corsair makes such good cases and Gigabye makes such good motherboards, everything just lines up like it's supposed to, and that makes your building so much easier. So now I'm going to grab the screws that came with the case. These are the coarse threaded screws I spoke of earlier. I'm just going to kind of spread them out here on the table. And I need 5 of those screws because remember, one of those standoffs doesn't use a screw. I would recommend, if you're a novice builder, that you use a magnetized manual Phillips screwdriver, number 2 Phillips screwdriver. Again, I'm an experienced technician. I've done this countless times. So I'm just going to go ahead and to expedite this process so that we can hurry up and get to the end. Normally, I would even recommend that you don't tighten these screws down until you get them all started, but it's fitting so perfectly into this case that there's no reason, I mean, there's no reason to have to wiggle it or anything. It was just made to go in there. They fit very well together. That is not always the situation with some motherboards and some case manufacturers. That's it. The board's installed. So at this point, all we have left to do is hook up the power cables to the motherboard, the solid state drive, the optical drive, and the data cables, along with the front port switches and lights, and then make the cables look pretty. That's all there is to it. So I'm not going to continue this video to show that because I've done it in all my previous videos with nice close-ups, and it's exactly the same process. And just go back and look at any of my previous build videos and you'll see those details of the cabling process. But because this video has gone on quite a bit longer with all my storytelling, I just want to show you the basic build process. So the next time you see this computer, it's already going to be cabled up. I'm going to have the operating system and all the drivers installed, and then we're going to start running the performance benchmarks to show you the difference between that pre-built $350 computer versus the computer we built ourselves for the same amount of money versus the computer the cheapest computer that I would build and I would associate myself with. Now, for those of you that are interested in what this computer looks like with all the cable management done, this is the inside of it now, and you'll see that I've wire tied everything up and made it as nice and neat as I can. There's a lot of extra cable from the power supply for additional hardware, and on this case, because it's for business use, I put those cables strapped down right through the holes with a nylon zip tie to have them easy to access. It gets a little tight when you try and hide these back here in this spot between the rear panel and the motherboard backplate. So what I've done for my customers is, first of all, my customers are never going to open this up and see this. Secondly, they want me in and out of their office as quickly as possible. So it costs them less money for my labor, and they have less downtime where their employee is waiting for their computer. So by leaving these unused cables here, I can easily, quickly access them if I need to add another hard drive or clone a drive or add any other hardware. I can get in there, do what I need to get done, strap it back down, and get back out. We're not entering this into any contests for cabling, design. This is just the basics right here, what you see. We're running the umbilicals out through this cabling hole. We've got our two SATA cables, one to the optical drive, one to the hard drive. I just tie up the excess. Same with the USB 3 umbilical to the front port. And of course the motherboard power from the power supply here and here. This one runs behind. And then this is our front port audio cable here. This is our rear fan. I don't hook up the front fan on this. There won't be any video card in here to generate any heat. All it's going to do is bring in dust. There are some people who say that that actually reduces dust. I will run that test in Arizona in some future video, but I can tell you from my experience, having a front fan makes the dust worse. There's people out to say it creates a positive airflow or negative airflow, whatever it is, that's supposed to reduce the amount of dust. And I'm telling you, here in Arizona, it does not reduce the amount of dust. It does just the opposite. And in a future video, I'll put my money where my mouth is, and I'll hook up a system with a front fan and let it run next to a system without a front fan. We'll let them run, I don't know, it's going to have to be at least a month, and then open them up and take a look at which one's less dusty. But anyway, I don't hook that front fan up. It's in this build, it's not necessary. If there was a gaming card in here, I would definitely put that fan on. There's no issue with the solid state drive getting hot. And the case is so big and the motherboard's so small, airflow is not going to be a problem. This is going to be a nice, cool running computer. And I just thought you'd like to take a look at what the cabling looks like on this one for business use. And when we run our performance tests, consider that cabling versus the cabling that was in the HP or in the other one. It's a lot cleaner. It's a lot easier to work on. And like I said, it's not an art form. It's not the best cabling anybody could ever do. But again, it is for a business, and no one is ever going to open this up except for me or some other tech. And I'll tell you what, if I was a tech and I opened this up and this is what I saw, I'd be impressed. So, all right, I just wanted to get that out of the way. And there's your visual of the inside of the completed computer.